header is quite catchy, and I think I'm more interested in don't bet against India than the Sensex number itself, because Sensex number is that's why we said Sensex may hit 2 lakh in 10 years, and we'll give the mathematics of why we are saying this, and how much belief we have. I mean, I have seen Sensex moving from 100 to 52,000 now in last 40 years. So it's not that I have not seen this happening in every 10 years. It has happened. But the only thing is it doesn't go in a straight line. There are corrections, there are crashes, and then finally it reaches. It's like going from Mumbai to Pune. I mean, you don't go straight at 50 kilometer speed. You sometimes you take a break, sometimes you slow down. But in 3.5 hours, you definitely reach Pune. So it's like that. I mean, Sensex is moving at a particular speed. There could be a slowdown, there could be speed, but in 10, 11 years, maybe 8 years, depending on a lot of things we'll discuss, it can make it to 2 lakhs. And that's why I'm saying we Indians, we should not bet against India. It's an amazing opportunity. Let's look at this discussion. So prediction is dangerous, especially of the future. So we must never get into, we must not take all these things very seriously. It's just a thought process. It's a stimulating thing, but take it with pinch of salt. I mean, this guy says that I have no way of figuring out the future except for the experience of the past. So I know of no way to judge the future but by the past. So we have used a lot of extrapolation techniques, I mean, very simple ones. But let's look at how things have moved. Last 10 years, I mean, we are talking about next 10 years, but what has happened in last 10 years? That 20,000 index in March 11 has been to 50,000 now. So that it has grown only 2.5 times. So we are talking about 4 times. So somewhat more asking, but actually the 35-40 year rate is more like 13%, 13.5%. So last 10 years has been very challenging, and somehow it is less than the base rate. And hence there is reserve of growth ahead, and our sense is that we'll go back to more like 14-15% for next 10 years, and so that's the thought process here. Look at the what has happened in the world. The Chinese GDP has grown at about 10% compounded in last 10-11 years. World has grown at 2%, and India has grown at about 4%. So we have not done as well as China, and China is absolutely scorching pace, even at this level of $14-15 trillion of GDP. What has happened to the India and China in terms of market cap? India has reached about $3 trillion market cap, whereas China has moved, the Chinese GDP has moved from 2000, which was not very much gap, has moved to 14 trillion, and we are stuck at about 3. So China today is where China was, India is today where China was in 2006. Actually, just 2-3 years back, the gap was just about 9-10 years. Now the gap has increased to 14-15 years. I think we have to do a lot of catching, and this COVID has further set us back in terms of, I mean, we have done well vis-a-vis the world, but not as good as China. So it will take a lot for us to race up to China, or at least become matching in terms of growth. So that's why when I was talking to a few government officials, the only thing they talk about is one single formula for government, one single mantra they have is growth, growth, growth. Let's see how Babus deliver, and they have their own style. You may agree, may not disagree, but they are able to reach those targets. And India being entrepreneurial economy, a lot more private in the hands of private sector, I think we will not have a very measured kind of a growth rate. We will have a lot unevenness will be there. So sometimes you'll see 3-4 years of very rapid growth, maybe even 8, 9, 10%, and then suddenly it will slump. But I think overall to get 6-7% should not be very difficult. Now, this is the India, the next $1 trillion opportunity. We wrote this paper in 2007, and here I think India has this journey is quite, for any nation, this journey is very, very interesting. What took 60 years? We got independence in 47, maybe I was 8 years old. GDP was $10 billion. $10 billion in for the entire nation of about 35 crore Janta. So today, it took 60 years for it to become 1.2 trillion in 2008. And that time, $1,000 per capita. And we thought that what it will take to achieve next $1 trillion. And next $1 trillion happened in next 7 years. 7-8 years in 2015, we hit the second trillion. Third trillion, as per our calculation, should have come by more like 2021. That got delayed to 23. And so fourth trillion will happen now, as per this calculation, maybe in next 2-3 years. So every trillion will come much faster. Now China incidentally became $1 trillion in 98, and today it is 15 trillion. So, and every year at 6%, they're adding almost $1 trillion every year. So I think India is in that journey. Right now it is taking 3-4 years on a 3-year base. It will take about a little longer period to achieve maybe 3 years to achieve 4 trillion. But every trillion will come at shorter and shorter period. And after 2 or 3 cycles, 6th or 7th, or maybe 6th or 7th or 8th trillion, I think 8 to 9 will come in 1 year. So this is the journey which is accelerating the entire thing. And why it is important? This is just a compounding. At a national level, compounding is much easier. So what is so special about this? The special thing is this. When when per capita GDP is $1,000, you are literally a poor country. I mean, I'm quite sure 50-60% of the population below poverty line. And discretion is only in some cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Ahmedabad. I mean, some few cities have very thin sliver of discretionary spend. When it goes from $1,000 to $2,000, which has happened, what happens is suddenly the basics remain from say 900 to 1,000, but the discretionary go from 100 to 1,000. So what is a nominal GDP growth? The doubling of per capita GDP implies 10x spend growth on the discretionary side. And that is where underlying businesses, they do extremely well. They don't know what is working for them. And this keeps hitting segment after segment, maybe not simultaneously, but clearly this keeps happening. It's like saying that till 2007, we were more of a bicycle market or maybe low-end bike market. By the time it is 2014-15, we became pure bike market, and actually cycle demand started coming down. And by the time we go to $4,000, that is about in closer to 2025, 26, or maybe 27, will be $4,000 per capita. At that point of the same economy, from premium bikes and entry-level cars, it will move to mass car and maybe little mid-size cars. So that's how the journey from bicycle to motorcycle to car happens. So this is the power of discretionary spend build up, and we are going to see all sorts of this thing in various discretionary. You see the way marriages happen. Earlier, destination marriage was just few guys, even in Mumbai kind of place. Today, I think 50-60% of slightly bigger marriages are happening in destination. And since the families are small, the kind of discretionary spend happens. I think in this COVID, one of the best discretionary spend which has been very badly hurt is the marriage expenditure. So as the economy opens up, you will see all the pending functions are going to happen, apart from whatever regular 1 crore marriages which are happening. So I think discretionary spend is going to build up, and nobody can stop that journey. It is going to be just exponentially bigger and bigger. Another thing which is happening is that savings build up. In last 10 years, we might have saved as a nation, because savings is a very different animal than the expenditure. So it's more like a cumulative kind of, it's like a ocean. So in last 10 years, we have saved about $7 trillion US. But in next 10 years, we are going to save more like 14 trillion. So you have the base of say 7 trillion, and on top of it, you are giving a mountain of another 14 trillion. So you imagine what kind of savings and investment economy. Once you have the savings, then investment. And what are the investment tools? Whether it is a capital market, I think that's where it is going to be the biggest. The broking, the volumes in the stock market, the wealth management, your asset management, your insurance, your all sorts of things which are which deploys the financial savings. you are going to see much larger deals, much frequent deals, and it will be a nationwide thing. So, I mean, you imagine in US what happens when the cumulative savings are running into hundreds of trillions of dollars. So that is what is really. I mean, I think the savings base, I mean, the wealth base is about on a $20 trillion economy. I think it is about 150 to $200 trillion of savings, and that's why they are the provider of capital to the whole world. And the now the wealth has become so big for China, Japan, and a lot of European countries and Arabian countries that all the wealth management has gone into US, and from there it is getting redistributed to the whole world. So there is a lot of capital and lot of wealth management. So this is what is going to the savings and investment boom is what is going to happen in next 10 years, and this will also lead to opportunity in capital goods, construction. Once this entire cycle picks up, I think we are going to see some very interesting times. So can India be the next China? I mean, everybody wants to be the best of the category, but I mean, I don't know. It is very tough to say. What China has done is almost impossible, but there is always a way to once they have done it in a particular way, we also know how to crack the code for growth in India. So the issues which are the things which are in favor. I mean, the way I think is that democracy is one of the biggest thing. Where a rule of law prevails and there is a lot of freedom to everybody. And then you have a country which is moving towards one nation idea, one unified market, one income tax, one GST, one Aadhaar, one ration card, one mobile number, one bank account. So everything is going to be one. And with one digital network, you can imagine what you are creating of 1.4 billion people in this country with a democratic framework. Second, demography. I think it is second highest population of the world, huge domestic market dominated by youth. 40% is below 20. It is the youngest large country with 27, 28 years as the average age. So this is amazing demography. Then third is the demography, where high income and upper middle income segment is 1 out of 4 households today. I mean, you see how pyramid is shifting from a perfect pyramid in 2005, where 69% of the people were below poverty line. So from there, you have gone to only 15%. That itself is a huge achievement. Look at the top end. From 1 million household, now it has become 29 million household. So that's the thing. And 1 out of 2 households by 2030 will become middle and high income and middle segments. So, so I think the elimination of poverty and burgeoning, kind of consuming class at every level is what is going to be the situation. I think if we don't have disruptions, whether internal or external, I think this story is going to pan out very, very clearly. I think we had a lot of disruptions in the economy in the last 4 or 5 years. If there is no disruption for whatever reason, I think you see the private sector, the entrepreneurs and the consumers both building on each other's strength. Digitization. India's global reputation built on the back of soft. Typically, an emerging market of $1,000 to $2,000, they are not in the forefront of digital technology. And digital is one thing. Digital capability and embracing the digital power is something which has exponential payoff in course of time as it enters every single possible industry. And then on top of it, it is a source of income for us. We are, I think, in 99, 2000, Y2K happened only for India when the exports were just about $2, $3, $4 billion. And today it is upwards of $165 billion. And McKinsey NASSCOM report says in next 5-6 years, we are going to hit $350, $400 billion. So I think this COVID has given new impetus to digitization for the whole world. Internet, 5G, speed, and India's capability to wire up for all the nations in the world. And while they're wiring up for most sophisticated clients in the world, I think the same technology is being used locally to build up. Even Aadhaar itself is such a huge achievement in terms of creating it in such a short time. So I think digital capability of India is awesome prowess, and we have not seen what all it can do in the course of time. Then you have a forex balance. I think one of the things which is most rare and most difficult for any country, poor country, is a forex. I mean, nobody gives you. It is like having your own money in the global marketplace. Having $600 billion and yet counting is one of the biggest achievements. In fact, India's story started in '91 when we had the bankruptcy of forex. I mean, we literally had 1 or 2 weeks of import cover, and from there to achieve 18 months of import cover today is quite a story. Nobody talks about it. It is 17% compounded growth from '91 till date in terms of forex buildup. So clearly, it has come at a cost. But I think now the world will have a different kind of confidence on rupee as we go along. And in abundant, super abundant capital in the world, I think this is one of the reflections of that. But you see the bar at the end in today, how it is building up. In the last 1 year, we got 100 billion, and the way it is going, I think there could be another 100 billion in offering in next 12 months. And that is also pressurizing the interest rate, and inflation is also well under control. So this is to be seen. But I think very stable dollar will also give you a lot of confidence for the foreigners to increase the trade with India. And I think even the hedging cost will come down, and hence the interest rates can fall. But this is one subject where I think a lot is going to happen, and only time will tell how things are going to work out here. Declining crude has given a lot of help in terms of current account deficit. Now, because of $60-70 of oil in last 1 or 2 years, we have actually had a small current account surplus. And so I would think that now with the galloping software exports and even accelerated merchandise exports, I believe in the current year we are growing at about 25-30%. I think current account deficit is well under control, and hence rupee is going to be very, very firm. And the added advantage is the most stable government in place. I think after 30 years, this country has got a stable government, proper majority government, and that is a big thing for any country. And our suggestion is that make business as the business of India, because we are talking about job creation, and that can be done only by private sector enterprises. So entrepreneurs should be right at the front of the government agenda, and government is following. I mean, at least in their manifesto and their utterances, they're saying no business to be in business, minimum government, maximum governance, and I think kick-starting growth has been the only thing right on top of their mind. So COVID is right now, despite such bullish talk and backdrop, I think the real thing is that COVID has been quite a painful blip, and we are seeing beginning of the end. So COVID now a known base. The difference between last year and current year: last year COVID was small, but fear was big. Right now, COVID is big, but fear is small because now it is known based, and global fiscal and monetary response has been unprecedented. I mean, I think they have learned from the GFC and many other crises, and this time central bankers have done amazing job all over the world, and they flooded the market with liquidity, and governments came to support the suffering businesses and the people in the best possible fashion, and still it is on. So this has been a fantastic thing, and that's why, despite the health tragedy all over the world, more than 3 million people have died, and yet markets are at all-time high all over the world. In India, fiscal deficit of 9.5% is unthinkable, and hence the fiscal response of government is clearly visible, and RBI is making sure that despite the little heightened inflation, liquidity is sufficiently there, and even the bond prices, the yield are kept at about 6%. Vaccination has been the beginning. I mean, I think we'll be one of the fastest vaccinating country, and by end of December, I think we would create some kind of world record in terms of number of successful vaccination. I expect a K-shaped recovery because COVID has definitely hurt a lot of low and not so well managed or not financially strong companies before the COVID, and COVID has done further blow to those companies, and hence I expect to start with K-shaped recovery, and then as it gathers momentum with the help of fiscal and monetary support, I'm sure even the mid and small companies or those who are not managed well, they would also come back to life. So, but to start with, I think well-managed companies will do well-managed and larger companies will do better than smaller companies. So, so when we say Sensex can hit 2 lakh, what is required? Let's look at the maths of it and how it is likely to happen. Here, I think what we are betting on is that between 2009 to 20, for last 10, 11 years, the EPS growth or corporate profit has been very, very anemic, just about 6%. So we have lived off just about re-rating, but now we are seeing that the profit growth is surging at about 25-30%. So now we are seeing really the 500 rupees EPS is now actually building up at 535, 750. I think we are expecting that next 4 quarters after the COVID recovery, 22, 23, they are going to build up very, very rapidly. The profit outlook for the corporate world is looking very good. So I think though the right now P multiples are at a high, more like 27, 28, but that's a thing because of the change of the cost of capital in the world. So today, when the world is at literally 0 or 1% interest rate, and the stocks are at all-time high, there is a superabundance of capital which is showing up in asset class, equity asset class, and it is now showing up in various other asset classes like commodities. You are seeing all sorts of commodities are just going on fire. So I think the excess liquidity which is there in the system, and that to low cost liquidity, I think that's so you have the combination of fiscal policy, monetary policy, and then the market oblique speculators. I think this combination is quite lethal, and we are going to see some abnormal valuations till this liquidity stays the way it is. So this can happen, this 2 lakhs can happen with a 12 to 13% normal GDP growth rate, 7 to 8% real, and 4 to 5% inflation. I would say more like 7 plus 5, and corporate profit growth to be a little higher because we are running at one of the lowest 2-3% of GDP as a corporate profit to GDP right now. It can go up to as high as 7-8%. Who knows where it is going to go? US is trading at more like 10-11% to GDP. So we have a chance to go at least up to 7-7.5%, and that is what exactly will do the magic. So the growth, the corporate profit growth to be a little higher than 12-13%, more like 15%, and the current P multiple to be maintained, and that will give us 15% CAGR over 10 years is 4x. So 15 to 4 is 2 lakh. So even if we hit 175, 180, I would say we are broadly there. And it could be, and it all depends on how well the underlying underlying economy does. If economy does very well, like 2003, 2008, that kind of a situation being built, because with abundance of capital, hardworking country, and lowest cost labor, and enterprising entrepreneurs, I think we have a terrific chance to make it. And the world discovered China in 95 to 2020. Now, China itself is going to be a big export market for us, but now the world wants another pool of low-cost labor and ethical guys, and I think India is well out there. So in China Plus policy, you could see some crazy times. I mean, achieving 6-7% growth, I think the opportunity is very large. I think it is quite possible this will happen. This could happen. So sector to watch out for in this kind of a situation. I would say that, see, value migration has been one of the biggest themes where people have made tons of money, and now open up place will be another short-term strategy till economy normalizes. So what is value migration? Value is profit and market cap migrates from outdated business design to superior business. This is the very simplest possible thing, and this keeps happening. In telecom, we saw from wire to wireless. In IT, from Boston to Bangalore. Banks, from public sector to private sector. In many business, from unorganized to organized. And the whole lot of things you are seeing, public sector to private sector is happening not only in banks, it's happening in insurance, and a whole lot of things wherever government has been predominant and they have been vacating the sector. you will see that entire market share is going to go to the private sector. So, and then there the value is created big time. This value migration has been one of the themes which has made a lot of money. And now you see even more accelerated value migration on the back of digitization. So IT, we have talked about it. Private banking, you see what is happening. More than 100% of the market, I mean, bulk of the market cap, except for SBI, is with the private sector banks. So though the public sector has 60% of the business, but I think 90% of the market cap is the private sector. So the verdict is very clear. And now they are going to lose, and it is being predicted that public sector is going to lose market share very rapidly. They don't have a price to book, and they don't have capital. So private sector has the capital as well as price to book. So when you want to grow and you want to raise capital, today all the top 5-6 banks can raise capital at 3 to 4 times price to book, whereas none of the public sector banks can raise money at even one time price to book. So it is almost impossible. Market is saying that we'll not give you capital. At least right now, that's the statement. So clearly, the incremental market share private sector is going to be more like 70-80%. And I think because of digitization, we are going to give birth to very large banks with 10-12% market. So I think Indian banking story is still live, and we are going to see some fantastic gains in the market cap here. Private life insurance, I mean, here you have LIC on one side, Big Daddy, and then these 3-4 are there. So I think this is again, first thing that there is a low penetration, so the industry itself is likely to grow very rapidly. And in that, there is going to be a big guy losing market share continuously. So I think you are going to see some interesting companies coming up and creating multi-baggers in next 5-10 years. Open up please. Sectors can be classified into two segments: lost demand and postponed demand. So the companies like beer company or a soap company or I mean all the food companies, FMCG. So they have lost demand. I mean pre-COVID, say there were 100 units were consumed. Now it has come down to 20 or 25 or something like that. So that will go back to obviously 100. But the demand which has been forgone in last 2 years, that cannot come back. You cannot consume 300 bottles of beer because you didn't consume for last 2 years. So that is not going to come back. But postponed demand is very interesting. If you have not bought your car for last 2 years, the car demand doesn't go anywhere. Every single piece of car or motorcycles are going to be sold in the next 12 to 18 months by the buyers, because the guy who wants a car, he wants a car pre-COVID as well as post-COVID. So I think so we have to look for the businesses, but market has hammered both the segments equally badly. So I mean, so you have to, so like entire automotive segments or consumer durables, paints, selective industrials. So I think you have to see, I mean, there is going to be some interesting trades, because once the market is at times it is short term in the sense that 2 or 3 or 4 quarters bad results, and then stock goes nowhere in the sense that actually it is being hammered. And publicly, particularly in the mutual funds, the patience is very short. I mean, institutional money has the lack of patience. Bulk of these kind of stocks are lying with the retail investors or promoters. So when the opening up happens and the quarter results start coming, you see these stocks doing exceedingly well, and they will cover up for whatever momentum they had lost in the past. And what can go wrong in this kind of India story? What I've seen is that India story does happen despite all the challenges. But there could be a deep correction next month or next year. So global shocks, global financial crisis. I mean, today we are swimming in liquidity, but I mean, when you see too much of anything, that scares me. I mean, there's too much of liquidity. So how it will come to haunt us? I mean, something which is not natural is not going to be natural in the sense that that first one, global shock, global financial crisis, or inflation. I mean, leading to global monetary tightening to control the inflation. So that can kind of create a problem. Then completely unpredictable event, which you cannot even think, like COVID. COVID was not even thought 12 months, 14 months back. So those kind of events can come. Political risk. I mean, as I said, one of the strong points is that India has that after 30 years, very stable government. So, but then we have also seen, I mean, markets did very well when we had a challenging governments, coalition governments. So I think political risk in India is low, I would say. So, I mean, any kind of government has created, the markets have created wealth in whatever kind of political this thing, but still it remains a risk for, I mean, I would say that real risk is the GDP not growing, the pace at which we are saying, say 6-7%. That is what they have done in last 10 years, and I don't see any reason why they will not do it in next 10 years. Situations are conditioned, and more particularly, the forex balance of 600 billion is still surging. That gives me confidence that for a courageous government, there is no lack of resources for doing whatever they want to do. The issue is whether they are ambitious enough to achieve that 7-8% growth or not. So conclusion, India is the ultimate next $1 trillion opportunity story, because we are 140 crore janta with just about $2,500 per capita. This is global average is $10,000. I mean, you cannot have a more prepared growth story than that of India. And their democracy, digital power of a country, a poor country of this size, is unbelievable. Dollar reserves, stable government. I don't know what can go wrong, but COVID is a temporary blip, and we will see vaccination. Vaccination will definitely mark the beginning of end of COVID. And as I said, we can hit the very large number in next 10-15 years. And why 10 years? I mean, we have to be investor for decades. I mean, I met somebody yesterday who was 40 years. I said, you are 60 years ahead. Why 10 years? So, I mean, you do compounding at 15, but why you should not be seeing 500x what I have seen in my life, you will see in your life. So that's the kind of potential of compounding in the Indian economy, because it's a very potential economy with very small market cap or GDP. And I mean, we have talked about the play, and hence my sincere request to all the investors is, don't time the market. Just don't time the market. Whatever is the equity appetite, just play to the fullest. And hence, don't bet against India. Be optimistic and patient, because compounding of equity will work only over a period of time. So you have to bring patience, and that can be brought only by you. Don't try to time the market, and don't play around with your portfolio too much. So that would be my last words.